LBC News.
Now, the ministers have delayed a promised ban on no-fault evictions indefinitely until after improvements are made to the legal system. Campaigners say tens of thousands of tenants have been kicked out of their homes since the government first suggested it would introduce the Renters Reform Bill in 2019. Well, Ruby Lott-Lavigna is a political reporter for Open Democracy, and she's been taking the time to speak to LBC News. And we asked, what was the reaction to this?
I mean, shock, anger, both as someone who has been reporting on this since it was first announced or mentioned 4 years ago as a manifesto commitment, and also as a tenant who faced a no-fault eviction a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow. So were you given much notice surrounding this?
Yeah, well, I was given, the legal amount of notice that is required, which I think is 2 months. It's really, there's nothing you can do as a tenant. There's no way you can challenge it. I was lucky. I was able to find somewhere else to live. But I've moved probably 4 or 5 times in the last 6 years. And it's very difficult kind of to have a life with that kind of insecurity hanging over your head. And I think that's what scrapping Section 21 no-fault evictions was about, really. It was about allowing tenants to have security and not be evicted because, they've complained about damp or because their landlord just wants to kind of up the rent loads. And now the fact that it's going to essentially be delayed indefinitely, I think is really, really astounding. And it was really the main part of this bill, to be honest. And the fact that that is being kind of kicked into the long grass, I think will upset a lot of people.
I was going to say, so quite clearly from what you just told me, as you say, you were lucky, you found something. I hope you're settled and you're stable, but there's going to be plenty of others that are going to be concerned perhaps for their long-term stability.
Completely. I mean, there's one thing to be a tenant who is evicted, who can then, has a decent income and can find another house. It's not great, but, that's probably your best option for most renters. On the other end of the scale, this is causing homelessness. Section 21 no-fault evictions are one of the leading causes of homelessness. It has hugely damaging effects on people's mental health, even if they're not kind of thrown out onto the streets. So it's a really kind of troubling thing to see delayed by the government, if not entirely gotten rid of.
And if I'm right in saying, or right in thinking, this isn't just about no-fault evictions, it's also trying to improve conditions, generally speaking, surrounding the rental market. Just how much of a difference is this going to make when it does finally come into practice?
So I think we'll only be able to judge that once we see a final draft of the bill and once a lot of the kind of loopholes are gotten rid of, and if they are gotten rid of. So, for example, they wanted to scrap Section 21 no-fault evictions. Of course, that has now seemingly been delayed. But even if that had gone in, there was still the ability for landlords to evict you if they wanted to move your family member in, which maybe sounds okay, but who was policing that? There's no part of the bill that explains who's going to check that. So, for example, there are parts of the bill that could easily be exploited. Other parts, such as, for example, criminal landlords aren't going to put their name on a national register, which is something that the bill also wanted to put forward. So a lot of people have kind of criticised that. A lot of the time, it's not an issue with the powers that the government have put into place. It's an issue with enforcement abilities. So a lot of local councils who are responsible for enforcing a lot of these things say, it's too difficult and it's too expensive. And there are so few enforcement officers in kind of housing departments across local councils that a lot of even the kind of good parts of this bill might not even get implemented properly, even if they became law.
She go on to say the government has denied claims that the issue is being kicked into the long grass. Just sort of finally from me, Michael Gove is expected to speak at the National Landlord Conference. What is it you like to hear from him? What are you expecting him to say?
Well, I would love to be there to report, but I personally have not been allowed to come by the National Residential Landlord Association, despite requesting press access quite a while ago. So unfortunately, I won't be able to give you scrutiny there at the time. But I think, he'll probably be going into this feeling pretty positive with this general news that Section 21 evictions are getting kicked into the long grass, or the ban on Section 21 evictions, mainly because the NRLA have been lobbying for this for a really long time. They have constantly said you can't introduce a ban on Section 21 evictions unless the courts are improved, even though I think only 1% of no-fault evictions ever end up going to the court. And so in a way, I think they'll probably be quite a positive audience for Gove. I imagine he will talk about other concerns of landlords that the department are considering, because, so far we can see that they're kind of taking their voices into account more than the voices of renters.
Ruby Lott-Lavigna there from Open Democracy speaking to LBC News.